welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Nick Maturo. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a project manager at ELAN working on our Quebec Relations project. I'd like to begin by recognizing that ELAN, and indeed the office space I'm speaking to you from, is located in Tiohtià:ke, which is the original name for Montreal in Kanien'kehá:ka, the language of the Mohawk, also known as Muniang, which is the Anishinaabe name given to the city by the Algonquin. Even though we're speaking to each other remotely, not in the same physical space, I do want to start by acknowledging that fact before we go any further and invite you to reflect on that where you are located as well. So with this in mind, I'd like to welcome you all to our second Quebec Relations webinar for 2022 thus far. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, Quebec Relations, or QR for short, is an ELAN project that's first and foremost about helping artists and arts organizations access funding and other key resources offered by the government of Quebec. So today we're going to be looking specifically at the film grants available in Quebec through the Société de développement des entreprises culturelles, or SODEC for short. And I'm very happy to have somebody with firsthand experience here to talk to us about SODEC's programs today. Joining us is Sergio Kirby, who is the president of Loaded Pictures, a Montreal-based film company focusing on complex social documentaries. Sergio has been producing, directing, and filming award-winning feature documentaries for close to 2 decades. You may have seen his films on CBC, the Documentary Channel, Canal D, Discovery, or the Sundance Channel, amongst others. And his films have been screened at A-list film festivals around the world. So a big welcome to Sergio. Thanks again for being here. So before I hand things over to Sergio for the bulk of today's session, I do just want to give you a super quick outline of how things are going to go. So first, I'll quickly provide just a bit of background on the Quebec Relations project, just so you can be aware of some of the resources that we offer beyond webinars like these. Then I'll turn things over to Sergio for his presentation. At the end of the presentation, we will have some time to address any questions. But I do also want to encourage people to ask questions throughout the session as they come up if you prefer, and you can do that by typing them in the chat. My colleague Francisco and I will be monitoring the chat, so we'll bring those up for Sergio during the presentation when possible. But we'll try to limit those questions during the presentation just to those ones that are really relevant to what's being discussed at that given moment. Any broader questions or questions that are very specific to your own situation, we'll try to keep those till the end, and we'll make sure that we address those in the Q&A. So first of all, what exactly is Quebec Relations? Why should you care about Quebec Relations beyond attending this webinar? Well, Quebec Relations is an ELAN project that was first launched in 2018. We received the entirety of our funding from the Secretariat for Relations with English-speaking Quebecers within the provincial government. And the genesis of this project really comes from trying to address any lingering concerns about Quebec's English-speaking artists and their ability to access services and funding programs in the province. So we know through talking with people in the community that many English-speaking artists in Quebec are often hesitant to apply to funders like SODEC compared to funders at the federal level, like, for example, Canada Council for the Arts. So simply put, our job is to make it easier for you and to take some of the stress and confusion out of the process. And we have 3 main resources I want to mention to you that can help you do that. So first, we have a searchable database on our website with over 200 Quebec-based grant programs. So those are all summarized just for the most relevant information, and indeed translated into English whenever necessary. So this is a great research tool to help you get a sense of what's available to you and to put together a list of grants you'd like to apply for. Second, beyond that, we also offer free funding consultations. So think of these as an orientation or strategy session that you can book with me to help narrow down your search and to find the most relevant grant programs, and then work through figuring out your eligibility to make sure you're able to apply. And third, when you're ready to take the next step beyond that, we offer free grant assistance from one of our experienced grant advisors to help you learn the fundamental grant writing skills and apply with more confidence. So that applies to SODEC grants, but also grants from funders like CALC, the Conseil des Arts et Lettres du Québec. I believe a number of people in attendance today are independent filmmakers who maybe don't necessarily have their own established production company. So CALC can be a really good funding option to keep in mind if you're an independent filmmaker. They have a bunch of really useful grant programs And I'd of course be happy to talk through those funding options with you during a consultation if you're interested. So that's a super quick rundown of what we do. I don't want to take much more time away from the topic at hand today, but all that to say is if you'd like to know more, please get in touch by email. I'll throw my email address in the chat for you. And with that, I'm going to pass things over to Sergio and let him share his presentation slides.
Thank you, Nick. I am going to click on here and share this. Thank you, Elan, for having me here. Can everyone see the slides?
All good.
So SODEC, this is an introduction, sort of a walkthrough process. So SODEC is definitely more of an advanced film funder. It's not normally for entry-level films, and I'll get into some details about that. This is basically kind of more of an understanding, an early process for people to sort of get a general understanding of how they would apply, or because they're going to need a company, or if they're going to go with someone. But I also will get a little bit into basic, building up a package or a project that would work for SODEC. So who am I? I've been producing for close to 20 years. Loaded Pictures is my company that I created in 2006. My focus has been predominantly on film production and feature films. And most of those are documentaries. I've produced around 10 feature docs. I work on social political films or films that are on underrepresented groups. And most of my films have in some way gotten SODEC support. So I've applied to SODEC for development, production, post-production, the emerging creatives category, which they used to have, which was called the Jeune Créateur, but they've changed it now to emerging creatives. I've gotten distribution support as well as festival support. So if I could get a little bit of an understanding from everyone, if they don't mind, we don't necessarily need to create this in people that don't need to speak to me, but if they could write in the chat so I can have a sense of what people are looking to apply, if they're interested in fiction, documentary, short films. Also, it's good to know if you have your own company, or if you're just an independent, or if you're working with someone. If they could just write that in the chat, that would be very useful for us and for me in terms of guiding this presentation. So SODEC. So what is SODEC? It is, I'm going to give you a little bit of a sense of their sort of the mandate that SODEC has. It is basically, it was put up, I think they had a few iterations early on, but it was, the earlier iterations evolved into what is now SODEC, and it was then, I guess, renamed as SODEC and then founded as SODEC as in 1995. The basic mandate is to support the culture within Quebec. So it does support cinema predominantly, but it also supports book publishing, artists, music, and heritage. Of course, being in Quebec, one of the things that we have, of course, this is predominantly a French language province. It is, that's the official language. So there's not a lot of funding that is allocated towards English projects, but they do try to allocate a certain amount, usually between 10, they say a quarter of the projects are, but I would say from experience that it's closer to 10 to 15% on average. But it really depends on each project and obviously who submits. They're trying to give the best projects the leg up, but they do have a quota in terms of what it is, and it would never go higher than 25%. They do support around 1,200 companies, so in Canada, in Quebec a year, and sometimes those companies may get multiple support, but but it's still a good amount of support. But the mandate is very much, to support culture, heritage, and the arts in Quebec. So the basic criteria for SODEC, it's a commercial fund. And there's different ways of looking at commercial funds versus arts grant models. For instance, CALC, Canada Council for the Arts, or even Montreal Arts Council. One way to think about that is that a commercial fund is interested in the project's viability, is what they deem to be commercially viable. So as a fund, would it raise more money? Will it see a broadcaster? Will it get on air? So the criteria and sort of the level of gatekeeping that is involved in SODEC is much higher than you would have in a grant application. In the grant application, in the artist model, it's deemed what is most important as the artist is the primary thing. So the promotion of the artist. So it's very much about putting forward the idea that you're an artist and you're going to create a piece of work that is part of your work and part of your established career, but also something that has a comment on society at large, but from the artist's perspective. So they're less concerned about the commercial viability. In some cases, they will disallow a project if it seems to be commercially viable. So it's really important when you're thinking of going towards SODEC that your project has to be front and center. You have to have achieved a certain amount of eligibility, but they're looking at investing in a project that will potentially have a return. And on top of that, most of the projects that you're able to apply with need to have some sort of third-party support. Most of that usually comes in the form of a distributor or a broadcaster. A producer has to apply. And on top of that, that producer needs to have a for-profit company. So SODEC, of course, reserves the rights for the eligibility of the applicants. And so once they recognize your company and you as a producer for it, then you can continue to apply. But that is a first step. And it's essential that you meet with them ultimately to get a sense of what it is that whether or not you're even eligible. So the people that you need to speak to are here, and I would recommend you take them down. It takes around a month before they would get back to you and let you know whether or not. The process takes sometimes around a month before an application. They might not necessarily take that long to get back to you, but they want you to approach them for eligibility well in advance of a deadline. And the category that they need is that your company has to be something that is related to audiovisual industry. So typically you can't have just created a company. They want to know that you've actually produced something or made something or a film has been in a festival. It doesn't necessarily have to be your company, but it should be you if you're owning the company. And they can create a link between the company and the previous work that you've done. In a similar way that CALC or Canada Council won't just take a student or someone who has no artistic background. You have to have some entry level to be able to be recognized or your company recognized. And so a lot of people will work with production companies, such as myself, depending on the project, and they will then use that to move forward with that other production company because of the challenge of this. So there's the email here, and then Alain, Rondeau, and Genevieve are the people at SODEC that you're going to want to contact. And they are both easily reachable either through the phone number or through email. And you'll probably have to list some of the basic information. So we have SODEC. There is quite a few different categories you can apply in. And it's important when you're looking at applying, you go online to the SODEC website and you figure out what the deadlines are. But then you also, it's good for you to understand what they have available for you in terms of being able to apply. So the main categories, of course, are film, which is to a certain extent the largest part of the SODEC annual budget. And so the production side is basically what you would be applying towards if you were going to go for production. However, they have a development stage, so you can apply for development. They have creation emergent, which is basically people who may be entering in early in the market, have less experience. It's a great entry point for people who have a project and they don't have as much experience in the criteria, because the criteria can be hard in other categories. You still need to apply with a company, but they encourage people to apply with a company that is partnering up in essence. And so then you have maybe an emerging producer that's attached to the project, and the director and writer. And they have a development phase for that, and they also have a production phase for that. So it's essential that you look at approaching them early on with your ideas, but this still has to be packaged in a way that makes sense. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about proper packaging for a project. The different elements that are also available to you, although those are the most important ones, some of these other categories, they're reserved for a much more advanced stage, but they will give, SODEC also administers tax credits, and tax credits are basically, they're in essence a rebate that you get on money that you spend on the production. So at the end of the year, if your film is being distributed by a broadcaster and or a distributor, then you're eligible for your tax credits. Without that, you're not eligible. At the end of the year, you get money back based on the money that you spend on your production. And SODEC administers that. So that's another thing that you can apply to. Again, these can be more complicated of a process. They also offer annual funds for established production companies that they then are able to allocate towards projects that they deem that they want to develop, or projects, people that approach them that are interested in working with them. They may have resources they can allocate towards it. They also do some digital work, and so you can apply to them. You can apply to them for doing digital content as well. That is also a new field in the last 5 years. They've been building out. There is no tax credits eligible for digital content. However, they do have some interesting initiatives there. Again, it is the bar is high for a lot of these applicants. So a lot of them are companies that have been producing a lot of content, and they expect that the people applying for the digital content are, in a commercial aspect. So they're looking at, sophisticated games, very immersive museum-based content. I mean, a lot of times, again, they're looking at parties that are joining them with that in mind. So it can be a challenging application to apply for. But if you have a project you think is worthy, they will also provide funding for that. And they also provide funding for a distribution plan. So if your film is done, they will provide money for you to get your film out there. They'll provide money for you to go to festivals, similar to what CALC or CAC will do in providing money for you to go to travel if you've been invited somewhere. SODEC does have similar things for certain A-list or high-profile festivals. So there's a question that's being asked. So do you need a company to access funding for distribution example, for distribution? Example, you've made a short and you would like a budget to apply for festivals. Yes, in all of these cases with SODEC, you need to have a company to apply. There are other grants that are eligible, CALC, Canada Council for the Arts. You don't need a company. They want you to apply yourself because it's an artist-centric model funding. This is very commercial model funding. So they're trying to build companies within Canada. And another question is, to access tax credits, do you need to be recognized by SODEC or can you solo it? Well, SODEC is the one who administers the tax credits. So you have to get recognized. It's completely a SODEC-driven process. There's no other way to do it. And so you can only apply through them. They certify you And then there's a federal tax credit, which you are also eligible for if you meet the criterias. If your film is, Canadian content and is being broadcast or distributed in Canada commercially, then you're also eligible for federal. That you can do independent of SODEC. But keep in mind, SODEC is the tax credit arm of SODEC is somewhat independent from the funds. So you can apply to funds, and it's not related to your tax credits. So those are two different types of funding categories that you're eligible to access. So I am also going to dive in a little bit into the SODEC application process because, I've broken it down, the basics of it, but I will show you inside the portal in terms of it's an all online application. So once, of course, you would have applied, then they would have said you're eligible. They would have given you means to be able to access. And so, I've been applying since we started our company, and we've had success on a lot of our films. I'm going to just show you the inside of how this application works. I will have to stop sharing and show another screen. So SODEC Access is their new online portal, and it has been a major step up from the past, which was basically all paper. It was a lot of paper documents. However, keep in mind, this is a very lengthy process. There's a lot of documents that are required to upload. And you'll see up here, this is a SODEC Access. There's your programs you can apply to, and then there's your demands. Of course, here I have my name with my account, and over here I have my companies, because I will have sub-companies that will be applying. And you have to apply through a company. So you have to register the company, not just yourself, and then also the sub-companies that may also be applying. Like all things with SODEC, it's important to note that the world is, that Quebec is, Alan is a wonderful institution because Quebec is a French language, French-speaking province. So it is the only province in Canada that is singularly French, and therefore they don't have much services in English. It's great that they do provide funding for French and English language projects, but there's very limited access to their services in anything but French. So, for instance, if you are to turn it to English here, it basically gives you simple functionality on this page, but as soon as you go to fill out your formula, it isn't available. So you have to be prepared to work in the French language. So basically, as you'll see, I would have created a project. I'm just calling it Project X. There's a list of projects in your program section that you go through depending on what is available and what is up and coming. And then you would go and fill out, the formula and the demand. There's a fair bit that you have to fill out, everything. This is related to a company that's applying for development, but each application that you're going for, depending on what it is, will have a different list of things that you're required to fill out. But as you can see, it's fairly extensive. This is just one thing that has to be filled out. Now you're going to list all the names, all the people, whether they've lived in Quebec for 2 years, the screenwriters, whether they've lived in Quebec for 2 years, the amount you're asking for. I'm just giving you examples of some of these things. And there's stuff that's also relative to co-productions, to whether it's eligible for tax credits, etc. And then, of course, you save it or you submit that document. And there's all the other ones that are here. You have to put down a production schedule. You have to have your filmographies, the resume of the idea, the treatment. It's quite extensive. Considering the amount that is required, I kind of wanted to show you the basic steps that's required in terms of fulfilling this application. However, I will try to explain a little bit about building a project. So I'm going to switch the screen again back to the slide. So with SODEC, there is still a lot of gatekeeping that's going on there. So for some people, they may not be eligible. If you're just starting out and you create your own company, it's kind of recommended to at least have a mentor or a senior producer that you can work with, or work with another company to make the process go. For instance, the list of required documents, as I described earlier, is quite extensive, and this is all required after you've reached your eligibility process. So this is sort of a general list based on a development proposal, and this is just some of the things that they're asking for. But as you can see, it's like a page on research, a resume of your idea, proposition of your documentary. If it's a documentary that you're applying for, it could be, if it's a short film, they would ask for the script. Then there's usually a director's page and a writer's page that outlines their vision, letters from the creative team, all the other elements that are there. And then there's financial documents that you would also have to provide, budgets, etc. All the documents that you need are either industry standard documents that you can access from Telefilm, or there are documents that you can get from the site. The information, again, is all available on the SODEC website. However, as I said earlier, it is all in French, and so you will have to work through it in French. That may not be a challenge for some, but it may be for others. I wanted to just sort of go into a little bit about building out a project. So if you guys have a project in mind, if you're working on a film, it can be anything. There's some basic steps that really help a project get off the ground. And I'll give some examples of some of my projects. But basically, the fundamentals start with what I say is a one-pager. And it's a very useful just pitch page where basically you create a larger synopsis of your project. And then from there, you want to break it down and put together a log line, something that's much more a simpler one sentence or a paragraph about the synopsis that makes sense, that's grabbing. There's become way more emphasis on this in contemporary time, and especially keep in mind that SODEC is a commercial fund, so they're looking at it on a commercial viability, and this is what broadcasters expect. They expect you to be able to grab their attention immediately with very little words. So having a huge treatment for a project early on is not recommended when we're in a situation where you need to be able to build out a project, and you need to be able to get attention quickly from broadcasters, distributors, whoever. So the idea is to lead them in with small steps. Most broadcasters don't read, period. So when you are submitting things to them, they want to see it on the least amount of I'm trying to see the chats here. Some of the chats are come up, but
I can help you with that, Sergio. Someone is asking if the questions throughout the process, when you're already in the application process, can be answered in English as it used to be.
Yes. When I work with SODEC, I submit most everything, and I communicate with them in English. So they're not expecting you for an English project to submit in English. However, you be careful when you're filling out the form that you know what you're doing. But for sure, if it's an English script or an English documentary, an English feature film, you're not going to submit a French script. So they understand that. And I tend to have a working relationship where when I'm communicating with them, I respond in English, they respond in French. It works fine. Sometimes it's better if you are comfortable in French, then I would recommend that you communicate with them in French. It's always going to be to your advantage. And keep in mind, there are some categories where some projects are, there's quotas. So it may be to your advantage to apply in French if the project is potentially a French language project. So, for building out a project, and this is sort of where you want to go, you want to also create an image. And I'll give you some examples of some of our projects that received funding. So I'm going to show you two projects, one that was just recent, and then Roadsworth, which was a good 10, more than 10 years, no, 13 or 14 years ago. So The Forbidden Reel, which was a film that focuses on the history of Afghanistan and the filmmakers that made films, and so it shows the context of Afghanistan told through the eyes of filmmakers and all the films that they shot from the beginning of filmmaking in Afghanistan all the way up till the Taliban showed up, the first round of Taliban. So this was a funded film by SODEC. They funded it in post-production stage. And you can kind of see here, this is the synopsis. This was just the page that we had. This was a synopsis. Just this content, I was able to raise money to get to do our first shoot. So we were able to get development money and be able to do our first shoot, which then was able to raise my mouse tends to automatically slide between scenes. Okay, so this was a synopsis that breaks it down. So it's really important that you break it down. And of course, the log line in this was a compelling portrait of an unknown Afghanistan emerges from the story of the heroic efforts to save the country's extraordinary film archives. So that was one of the log lines. Obviously, as you're working on a project, there will be evolution and iterations and changes of your project. But the more you can condense it and the more that you can make it succinct, the better off you are. SODEC and granting applications, they want you to put together more information than, say, a broadcaster would early on, but they will read it all. So it's important, but you still need to bring it in steps. And it's important that you develop your project with sort of some of these things in mind. So then another project that we worked on and had SODEC support was Roadsworth Crossing the Line. Now this project was back in the day when log lines weren't as key. So in those days, the log line for this was Roadsworth. Crossing the Line is a portrait of an outsider in search of himself and the city that struggles to embrace him. It offers a glimpse into the rapidly expanding culture of street art, which silently demands that we rethink our public space. It is also a film about taking risks, which shows us that sometimes dissent is necessary. Now, if I were to redo that, I would probably make it much shorter, maybe make it into a 1 line or 2 lines. However, SODEC does usually want something in the paragraph phase as a short log line. Their resume they want is to be a little bit more, a few sentences. And so in this case, you can see this is sort of a 2-page project where you see you have the front cover and then a back cover, which gives details. In this case, it gives information on who the directors and producers are and the subjects. And it had other information as well. So I will also show you a trailer that of a funded film, just to give you an idea. Again, these are things you would need to build out. Like there's content that they're going to be looking for. You know, sometimes even in the development phase, they may require to have some visual content. When you're going to production, you absolutely need a demo or a trailer of some kind. And so I'll give you one of our projects. So this is, again, this is the Forbidden Reel, and this is an example of the project.
گفتن که از فیلم جایی که هست هر قدری که فیلم است پولش بکشید اگر یک برنامه فیلم بره وابجا
فیلم ما همیشه تاریخ مصور کشور ما بوده. از یک طرف فیلم می ساختیم، از یک طرف هم برای سینما سازندگی می کردیم. گفتن اگر یک بار دیگه زنها در صفحه تلویزیون پیدا شوند، جویای خون در کابل روان خواهد. چیزی که بعدها ما شنیدم این بود که ملا اسحاق نظامی آمد و برای کارمندای افغان فیلم میتونین فیلم ها را جای پنهان میکنیم. دمی عاشق پی کار خود دیوانگی هم میکردیم.
They believed these films had something to give to the present moment.
So that is an example of one of the films that was funded by SODEC. And it's important that the content that you're creating for them, you know, that you obviously there's a fair bit of the list that's required in terms of content that you have to submit. But it's also it's a fairly competitive environment. So the content needs to be there. You have to demonstrate what it is you're trying to say. It has to be something that usually has some commercial viability. So you already have a distributor or a project that you think and can build a marketing plan for that would go forward for distribution. So they're not interested in funding a film, say, that would just do festivals, some festivals. They want to know that the film will see a larger audience. That's not to say that they could fund films that end up just going to festivals, but typically in the production phase of the project, when you're applying for production or post-production on a film, they want to know that there's either broadcast support or you're about to get some sort of broadcast or distribution support. So that is key for SODEC, where that's not a category with CALC. And so I will just reiterate the importance of really building that up in terms of working with your content to build it. Start with a one page, start with a solid image, start with a solid synopsis, and then boil it down to sort of a one or two lines that really emphasizes the direction of where you're going. The other category is that SODEC is, while it's in Quebec, and there tends to be a lot of navel gazing that goes on within institutions, Canada predominantly. Thankfully, Quebec is less concerned about that, although it is an importance. So we got funding for a project that was in Alberta in the tar sands. That was far away from Quebec. We got funding for the Afghan project, the Forbidden Reel. That had nothing to do with Quebec. So your project doesn't necessarily have to be, representing Quebec in some, direct way. However, it does help if you are, and the basics of it, you have to show that the team is, of course, being a Quebec team that is, they're supporting Quebec industries, and that the content that you're creating in some way kind of shows and shares Quebec values. But try to, focus on getting a stronger film before you get into those kind of categories. So I am going to start going into the Q&A because I can go back into breaking down the deliveries, but it's a more of a detailed discussion, and we'd get lost in the SODEC access with, what to apply and how to apply. And there are a lot of yes and no answers that wouldn't be of much use to people. So I'm interested now in people putting in their questions. I see there's some on the chat. I would encourage people, if they have other questions, to join us. So yes,
Sergio, so I can read this one that is a bit long. So
sure, please do.
It's come from Senza Media, and I'll just read it exactly as it is. I have a question. I had looked into SODEC funding for a feature comedy film several years ago, and the requirement to apply is to get a well-known local production company to put 50% of the budget, if I remember correctly. Is that accurate, and is that still a requirement? If so, my experience with the many well-known company I had approached basically said that they have their own projects in development to apply for SODEC funding. So how does a middle-level artist with a small company looking to expand to bigger projects manage to apply?
So yeah, so that is the challenge. I mean, the idea here, so as I understand it, you have your own company, a local production company, and you do, the thing is that yes, SODEC will, like a lot of funds, they won't pay for everything. So you have to build, the Arts Council grants are the same thing. Some of the Arts Council will fund most of everything. With more commercial projects, the idea being that if any fund were to put more than 51% in, they would, in theory, own it. So the commercial model is very much based on the idea that you are supposed to own it and you're supposed to have control over it. If someone outright pays for everything, then you don't own it anymore. So you're hired to work for them. SODEC is not in the business of hiring, they're in the business of investments. So the idea is that you're coming forward with them for money, you're going to ask them for some of the money, but you're also getting money from elsewhere. If you're applying with a project, typically you would need, there's other eligibility requirements, i.e. you would need to be, have some sort of distribution plan. So a broadcaster or a distributor attached. They, in theory, are supposed to put money in the project as well. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. There's other funds that you would be applying for as well. If you have a company, then you would be applying for the Canadian Media Fund. If you are applying, and you could also apply, if you have a broadcaster, then you could also apply to the Rogers Fund. There's other commercial funds that would build out your budget so that then they wouldn't be asking for 50% from SODEC. And in most cases, they have a limited amount they'll put in. So obviously, if your budget's really big, they won't even get to 50%. But it is important that you look at other sources of funding when you're building your financial structure for your project. And it's key that you look at other commercial funds because that shows them that you're approaching it as a commercial project and not as a artist-driven project. So if the only other funding you have is CALC and Canada Council for the Arts, they may not see it as a commercially viable project.
Thank you for that, Sergio's next question is, do you know how much percentage of the budget goes to English feature documentary projects?
Well, it's not so much a budget thing. I would say that that basically it's around 10 to 25% of the projects. They haven't really done a breakdown of that I know that are in their annual report. But basically, they say that they will provide of the applicants that come forward, and it depends on the different projects. That there's around, anywhere from, if there's say 8 projects, there'll be maybe 2 projects are going to be English language. So it's less budget-wise and more. I mean, those projects may get more than another French language project, but they may get less. The budgets are relative to what the ask is. Typically, it would probably be proportionate in the same way. So it's around 10 to 25%. I think they like to see it as a 25% range. I think some of the Anglophone community would be critical and call it more like a 15% range. But yes, those are the basic breakdowns.
Okay. So next question from Ellen David is a trailer or demo definitely needed for the application? How does one put that together when you are just at the stage of looking for funding for future film development?
So if you're applying for development, you don't need a demo. So it's key to note. So it's useful if you have something, but it's not required, and it's not necessarily needed. But it's as you're going forward, so like, if you're talking to broadcasters or you're talking to other people, you will start to need that visual content. For the development stage, if we're talking about development for a documentary, then you want to sort of build up you build up the resources to be able to shoot something. So you can approach SODEC with a company or with a producer who's attached, or your own company if it's eligible, and apply for development. There is other funding. There is funding at the Canadian Media Fund. Telefilm also offers funding. Those are all categories that you can apply, as well as you can apply for development funding at CALC or Canada Council for the Arts. So you have to kind of look at different places. The National Film Board of Canada also will investigate money into a project early on, in which they would be either producing, or you can work with a co-producer to work with the National Film Board of Canada. And then broadcasters themselves, if they like the idea, if you send them a log line and a pitch and an idea that they think is good, they can also put money to develop a project. When it comes to fiction films, it's a bit of a different category, because you need to be able to pitch the idea, to be able to get funding to write the script. And in some cases, when you're going to production on a fiction film, there's a desire to see, how some of the scenes, a visual look, or either a lookbook. In some cases, it can be useful to have a little, like a sneak shoot that they've shot that basically demonstrates the capacity and the idea of the film. So I think that, it's tricky. At the early stage, none of this is easy. And it's always a struggle for development of projects, because we all have great ideas, but getting the funding to a point so that you can shoot the things, so that you can then show people your ideas, requires a lot of work and resource. And unfortunately, it's the most underfunded category. And most of us don't really make any money on a project until it gets into production. So it's a very vulnerable stage. So there's another question.
Yes. So the question is from Zenza Media. How would you get a broadcaster if you haven't shown the broadcaster a film yet? They have to show a film before seeing it? Sorry, they accept to show a film before seeing it?
No, I mean, a broadcaster can come on board early by basically the idea that they like what it is that you've told them, and then they can they can put early money in on an idea where they're basically saying they have the right to first right of refusal as the project goes forward. So that can be a development phase, which doesn't necessarily have there's an obligation that they would then take it on. So you have to, when you enter into kind of going towards a broadcaster, you have to be in the mind that you are going to eventually work with them. If you have no interest in working with a broadcaster, you wouldn't approach them. But a broadcaster will put money in a project, and eventually when they go to production, they are required to put it if you want to access any of the commercial funds, SODEC, Canadian Media Fund, Rogers. They expect that the broadcaster is putting money into the project. It's a minimal amount, but they do expect that it be of market value that they contribute towards the film. You have to be careful when you make relations with broadcasters. You don't want to break them. Like this is part of there's only so many different broadcasters you can approach. So if you're going to promise them something and then not deliver, you most likely won't be working with them again. So the idea is that they're going to work on it through stages. They start with development. They're going to present, the rest of the material after you go and shoot what you need to do to build your content, or in some cases write the script if it's a fictionalized project or a fictionalized series. Then you'd write it and then maybe shoot a demo of something or a teaser of something, and then have all the other accompanying documentation, the budget, the structure, the timeline, any other of the financing partners. You'd present that to the broadcaster, and then they would then decide if they're going to come on board, as would other parties: Telefilm, Rogers, SODEC, maybe other broadcasters, international funds, as well as second window funding as well. So it's a lot of building out a lot of different partners. But from a commercial standpoint, typically you are either going towards theatrical distribution or you're going towards a television distribution. So if you're making a relationship with one or the other, the plan is that you're going to, in most cases, you're trying to do both. You want to sell them in both different directions. So it's essential that you commercially, that you're going to go forward, that you're going to continue those relations. You can always have conversations about when it airs, how it's going to air, in what format it's going to come on, what geo-gating it's going to take place, what language it's going to be in. All those things are categories that can separate it so that you can have more than one partner, so that you can do theatrical before it reaches the broadcast window. SODEC is also involved in part of those discussions. I mean, one of the benefits of SODEC is that they review all the contracts and they will find discrepancies. They are what's considered to be an investment fund. So they expect to make money off of your project. So they will, as it is, they will put in money with the idea that they're going to get some money back. Therefore, they're going to review all the other contracts and make sure that they have equal amounts, or that the other investors don't have better advantages to them. Telefilm does a similar case. These are ways in which SODEC can then claim that it's getting a return on its revenue. It doesn't make much, but it does have some, and there's just an obligation that as a commercial market that you're supposed to be pursuing these things and generating revenue. So it's not simply just money that the government is giving to prop up the arts industry, but we're building a broader cultural industry. Is there any other questions?
Yes, there are. The next question is actually, I think it was already answered, which is the percentage that goes to English projects. So I guess we can move on to Nelly's question, which says, I am making a movie on hip hop in Montreal and its African roots. A part will be shot in Ghana. How can it be eligible, as it will be shot in Quebec and in West Africa?
So part of the application when you're applying in SODEC does ask you to list where the film is taking place. I guess a direct question to Nelly, is it a fiction or a documentary? Because there's different categories for documentaries as there are for fiction. I mean, I think in that case, if it's like a hybrid, it's good to kind of frame it more on the documentary side because there's a lot more room for, say, shooting in a foreign location. For instance, like we did on, the Forbidden Reel, it's all in Afghanistan. So, in the same case for you, you could totally shoot nearly all of it in Ghana. But if you're in Quebec, great, then you're fine. They will ask you to fill out a certain, like, where is the shoot, where is the post-production, where is development, all those things, and the days that you are, in West Africa versus the days that you're in Quebec or some other part of Canada.
Yeah, so there is another question here from Senza Media, which says, where would a bilingual project fit in, as you have an English and French category?
So, sorry, say that again. What would a Bible?
Yeah, where would a bilingual project fit in, as you have an English and French category?
So there is no category that is English or French per se. They just accept a number of English projects. So if it's clearly English, then it's just they're going to categorize it as an English. Bilingual is totally acceptable. There's nothing that says it. The only languages that they don't accept are outside of the French language. I don't think that they accept indigenous languages, although that may be changing. But whereas Telefilm does, and the Canadian Media Fund does, so it has to be French or English, and bilingual is a category that they accept. Typically, I think they want to have a project that is either what they say a double shoot, where you shoot it in English and then you shoot it in French, or they have some, or there's versions. I mean, a lot of the films that I make either have a French version or an English version. Most of them have both. And so they get sold to the French broadcasters as well as the English broadcasters. So there isn't so much a category of English or French. I mean, there is a place where you do click that off, but you can, you could submit it as a bilingual. That may require a little bit of a further conversation with Alain or Genevieve, but it should be fine.
Yeah. Okay. There is one more question. Do we have time for that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the question says, from Heidi, don't you need to exist for a year before you apply and have some film that has been shown in that year?
Yes, again, these are sort of the gatekeeping that the SODEC will put in front of you. That doesn't mean that there is, extenuating circumstances or there's opportunities outside of that. They want to have established companies applying to them that have already made something before they're applying. So those are the challenges. You have to have an argument to SODEC as to why you should be eligible. And you're going to have to push that. They may be like, no, you gotta produce something first on your own. However, keep in mind that there is the Emergent Creator Program, which is a great entry point. And they may be in a situation where they're like, work with someone else as your company is maybe doing the applying, but you have a mentor company that's then assisting you, or a mentor producer that's working with you to build it up and get to that point. But you're absolutely right. The particulars of your eligibility is really decided by the two people, Alain and Genevieve. So even my company has categories in which I'm eligible for and certain things I'm not eligible for. And I need to build either bigger budgets to access them, or I need to do more of, say, digital content to become eligible. There's certain there's even gated spaces within SODEC that you can't quite go sideways or up or around unless you've already established your level of eligibility.
So I think that's everything for questions so far, and we are sort of coming up to just before 12 here. So maybe we'll wrap there. So Sergio, if you have any sort of concluding thoughts or remarks.
No, I mean, feel free to reach out. I would recommend that you in the process of doing this, that you seek out, some advisory producer to guide you in the process. And you never know. I mean, those project producers and different companies, they have a certain niche and a certain mandate, and they're looking for different things. But if you find one that may fit within your category and your project interests them, they may take it on. You may want to work it through your own company, but it's good to be able to figure out what the dynamics of that relationship is and whether or not it would work. And I would suggest that there's a lot of complicated steps, and SODEC will help you with some of it. But to a large extent, it's good to kind of build your teams and have various levels of experience attached to your team. But happy to give the presentation, and people can reach out to me directly if they have any additional questions, and we can take it from there.
That's great. And I also want to add that, ELAN and Quebec Relations is also here as a resource for people as they work through this as well, whether that's sort of offering our own direct expertise or even just, connecting people with other people in the industry who could be helpful resources for them as well. So people should really feel able to reach out to us, and we'll help you in whatever way we can. So I guess that brings us to the end of the presentation. I want to say a huge thank you, Sergio. That was super interesting and super helpful. SODEC can seem like such a challenge when you're on the outside looking in. And I think that was like a really illuminating and helpful presentation. So thank you once again.
Cool. Happy to be here. And again, feel free if people have ideas, thoughts, or questions. I'm always around. I will put my email in the chat. If people want to email me, they can.